Welcome to Shadows of the Past, where the darkest corners of human history whisper their secrets. Tonight, we invite you to lie back, close your eyes, and let the rain carry you into a world of true crime. Stories so chilling, they linger long after the storm fades. This is Volume 9, a collection of 8 haunting cases that unravel the fragile threads of trust, love, and survival. Each tale is a descent into the shadows, where motives twist like vines and truths hide in plain sight. These are not stories for the faint of heart. They are raw, unfiltered accounts of lives shattered by betrayal, rage, and obsession. From a mother's desperate journey across continents to a student's final walk under a moonlit sky, we'll uncover the moments that turned ordinary lives into nightmares. Our voice will guide you through the fog of evidence, the weight of grief, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Into the rain falls, let it drown out the noise of the world. Let the darkness of the screen mirror the mysteries we're about to explore. We'll walk you through every step, every choice, every mistake, every clue, until the full picture emerges, stark and unforgettable. But be warned, these stories don't always end with closure. Some truths remain buried, and some shadows never fade. Tonight, we'll cross oceans and decades from the cobblestone streets of Spain to the quiet fields of Alabama. We'll meet people who loved too deeply, trusted too blindly, or hated too fiercely. And we'll ask the questions that haunt us all. What drives someone to destroy another? How far can desperation push a soul? And what happens when the past refuses to stay silent? So settle in. Let the rain be your companion as we step into the first story, a tale of hope, sacrifice, and a betrayal so brutal it left a family shattered. This is Shadows of the Past. Let's begin. Part 1, the disappearance of Nancy Pao Rees Gores. In a small Guatemalan village where the sun burned hot and dreams were scarce, a young woman named Nancy Pao Rees Gores dared to hope. Born in 1991, Nancy grew up in poverty, her days shaped by the rhythm of survival. Her family's home was little more than a shack, its walls patched with dreams of something better. Nancy was different, though. She had fire in her eyes, a quiet, unyielding determination to rewrite her story. She studied hard, her books a lifeline to a world beyond the dusty fields. By her early 20s, she was a single mother to 2 daughters, their laughter the only light in her grueling days. She worked tirelessly, her hands calloused from cleaning homes and sewing clothes, all to provide for her girls and her aging parents. But Nancy's heart carried a bigger dream. Her older sister had found a new life in the United States, her letters filled with stories of opportunity. Those words planted a seed in Nancy's mind. She saved every penny, her hope growing with each coin tucked away. In 2018, at the age of 27, she made a choice that would change everything. She kissed her daughters goodbye, entrusted them to her parents, and boarded a plane to Spain. It was a leap into the unknown, driven by the promise of a better future. Ciudad Real, a quiet town in central Spain, became her new home. Its narrow streets and ancient churches felt worlds away from her village, but the struggle was familiar. Nancy took any job she could find, cleaning houses, caring for the elderly, washing dishes in dimly lit kitchens. Her days were long, her nights lonely, but she never wavered. Every month she sent money back to Guatemala, her sacrifices a silent vow to her daughters. In her rare moments of rest, she'd call home, her voice bright with optimism. "I'm building something for us," she'd say, her smile audible through the crackling line. But beneath her courage, a shadow was growing. In 2020, Nancy met Carlos Bustamante. He was charming at first, his words smooth as the Spanish wine they shared. Carlos was a local, a man with a quick smile and a troubled past. Unemployed, volatile, and battling a history of substance abuse, he carried a darkness Nancy didn't see. At least not at first. Their relationship bloomed quickly, a whirlwind of passion that swept Nancy off her feet. By early 2020, they were living together in Santander, a coastal city where the waves crashed like secrets against the shore. At first, things seemed promising. Nancy was hopeful, even as Carlos's moods began to shift. His charm gave way to jealousy, his warmth to cruelty. He'd lash out over small things. Her late nights working, her calls home, her dreams for her daughters. Nancy, pregnant by mid-2020, felt the weight of his anger more keenly. At 4 months along, her body was changing, her future uncertain. She confided in her sister, her voice trembling over the phone. "He's not the man I thought he was," she whispered. "If anything happens to me, it's Carlos." And by those words, spoken on August 17, 2020, would haunt her family forever. The days that followed were tense. On August 12, during a video call with her parents, Carlos's voice cut through the background, sharp and menacing. Nancy's smile faltered, her eyes darting to the side. Her parents, thousands of miles away, felt a chill they couldn't name. On August 20, Nancy sent a brief text to her father, "I'm okay, I love you." Then, silence. Her phone went unanswered, her voice absent from their daily calls. Panic crept into her family's hearts. They reached out to friends in Spain, then the police, their pleas growing desperate. Carlos had a story ready. He told authorities they'd argued that night, a petty fight over money. "She left," he said, his tone flat, "took her things and walked out." But Nancy's family knew better. She'd never abandoned her daughters, never vanished without a word. Her life was built on promises, not reckless flight. The police, skeptical of Carlos's calm demeanor, began to dig deeper. On August 26, they searched the couple's apartment. What they found turned a missing person case into a nightmare. Blood stained the floor, poorly scrubbed, pooling in the cracks of the tiles. Tiny bone fragments glinted under the light, scattered like grim confetti. A hatchet, gloves, and heavy-duty trash bags, purchased by Carlos that very day, sat in a corner, silent witnesses to a horror unfolding. The air was thick with the stench of bleach, a futile attempt to erase the truth. Investigators pieced together a chilling timeline. Nancy's work as an escort, a secret she'd kept to survive, had become a point of obsession for Carlos. He'd known about it early on, even accepted it, but her pregnancy changed everything. His jealousy festered, his control slipping as her independence grew. The evidence suggested a calculated act. The blood, the fragments, the tools, all pointed to dismemberment. Carlos had turned himself in days after the search, but his denials rang hollow. "I didn't do it," he said, his eyes avoiding the officers. The investigation widened. Carlos's movements were traced. Erratic drives through Santander's outskirts, late-night trips to remote areas. On September 16, a grim discovery confirmed the worst. In a forested park far from the city's lights, police found Nancy's remains. Her body had been dismembered, scattered like refuse. Her unborn child, a life barely begun, was missing, likely disposed of separately. The brutality was staggering, a final act of rage against a woman who dared to dream. As the case unfolded, details emerged that painted a fuller picture. Nancy's strength, her sacrifices, her love for her daughters, they were the heartbeat of her story. But Carlos's darkness had consumed her. His history of violence, his addiction, his need to dominate, they were the threads of a tragedy waiting to unravel. The courtroom became a stage for justice where Nancy's voice, silenced too soon, echoed through her family's testimony. 2022, Carlos Bustamante faced judgment. The evidence was overwhelming, the blood, the bones, the hatchet, the lies. He was convicted of premeditated murder and dismemberment. Sentenced to 25.5 years in prison, the court ordered him to pay 50,000 euros, 0 cents, to Nancy's family, a hollow gesture against their loss. Her daughters, now growing up without their mother, would carry her dreams forward, but the weight of her absence would never lift. Nancy Pao Rees Gores had come to Spain seeking a better life. She'd fought for her family, her future, her hope. But in the end, she became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how love can blind, how trust can betray. As the rain falls outside, her story lingers, a whisper in the dark. What drove Carlos to such cruelty? Was it jealousy, control, or something deeper, something we'll never fully grasp? That's the first shadow we've uncovered tonight. 7 more wait, each darker than the last. Stay with us as the storm carries us deeper into the past. Part 2, the final drive of Lauren Burke. In the quiet college town of Auburn, Alabama, the spring of 2008 felt alive with possibility. The campus of Auburn University buzzed with students chasing dreams, their laughter echoing through the warm evenings. Among them was Lauren Burke, an 18-year-old freshman with a future as bright as the Alabama sun. She was kind, curious, and fiercely independent, her life just beginning to unfold. But on a Tuesday night in March, a shadow crossed her path, a shadow named Courtney Lockhart, a man whose desperation would turn a routine evening into a tragedy that still haunts those who knew her. This is the story of Lauren Burke's final drive, a tale of chance, fear, and a life stolen too soon. Courtney Lockhart was no stranger to darkness. Born in 1985, he'd grown up in a world that seemed to offer little mercy. By 23, he was a former soldier, discharged from the army under a cloud of disciplinary issues. His time in the military had left scars, none physical but deep in his psyche. He struggled with a low IQ, documented later at 86, and a growing addiction to legal substances that dulled his pain but fueled his recklessness. By February 2008, Lockhart was unraveling. Jobless, restless, and living out of his silver Chrysler Sebring, he roamed Auburn's streets, his mind a tangle of need and resentment. He needed money, and he needed it fast. His solution was crime. For weeks, Lockhart had been targeting women in parking lots, his method chillingly consistent. He'd wait in the shadows, watching as they approached their cars, then strike from behind, a revolver in hand. He'd demand their purses, sometimes their vehicles, his voice low and threatening. Most of his victims escaped with their lives, shaken but unharmed. But on March 4, 2008, his path would cross with Lauren Burks, and nothing would be the same. Lauren was a typical college student, balancing classes, friends, and the thrill of newfound freedom. That Tuesday evening, she'd parked her car near the student dorms, likely heading to meet a friend at the library. The lot was quiet, the sky darkening as dusk settled over Auburn. She moved with the confidence of youth, unaware of the eyes watching her from a nearby car. Lockhart, slumped in his Sebring, had been there for hours, his gaze scanning the lot like a predator. He'd chosen this spot deliberately, knowing students came and went, their routines predictable. When he saw Lauren approach her car, her keys glinting in the fading light, he made his move. What happened next unfolded in seconds but would haunt investigators for years. Lockhart slipped out of his car, his revolver clutched tightly. He approached from behind, silent as a ghost, and pressed the muzzle against Lauren's back. "How much money do you have?" he growled, his voice thick with urgency. Lauren froze, her heart pounding. She didn't answer. Perhaps she couldn't, the fear choking her words. Lockhart, impatient, shoved her into the passenger seat of her own car, sliding behind the wheel. The doors locked with a click, sealing her fate. Inside the car, the air was thick with terror. Lauren, trapped beside a stranger with a gun, screamed, a sound that pierced the night but reached no one. Lockhart, his nerves fraying, ordered her to be quiet. When she calmed, her hands trembling, she pulled $200, 0 cents from her purse, and handed it over, her voice pleading. "Take it," she said. "Just let me go." But Lockhart wasn't done. In a twisted logic, he believed she'd be less likely to escape if she had nothing to cover herself with. At gunpoint, he forced her to undress, leaving her in only her socks. Vulnerable and exposed, it was a cruel act. Born not of desire, but of control. A way to strip her of agency. He glared with one hand on the wheel and the other gripping the revolver. Lockhart drove. The streets of Auburn blurred past. Quiet neighborhoods, empty highways, the world oblivious to the nightmare unfolding inside the car. Lauren, her mind racing, tried to reason with him. She spoke softly, her voice steady despite her fear. "I can help you," she said. "I can get you a job, help you start over." Lockhart, his eyes fixed on the road, barely responded. Her words were a lifeline, but he was too far gone to grasp. At some point, Lauren's phone rang, shattering the silence. It was Michael, a friend expecting her at the library. Lockhart, his paranoia spiking, ordered her to answer. "Make something up," he hissed, the gun steady in his hand. Lauren, her voice trembling but composed, picked up. "I forgot about the meeting," she said quickly, hanging up before Michael could sense her distress. It was a fleeting chance, a moment where help might have come, but it slipped away, unnoticed. The drive continued, a grim journey with no clear destination. Lauren kept talking, her words a desperate attempt to humanize herself. She spoke of her family, her dreams, her willingness to forgive. "Your life isn't over," she told him, her voice a fragile thread of hope. But Lockhart's mind was elsewhere, lost in the haze of desperation and fear. They were on Highway 147 now, the road stretching dark and endless before them. Lauren, sensing her time was running out, made a choice that would define her final moment. In a burst of courage, she reached for the door handle and yanked it open. The car was moving fast, the wind roaring as she threw herself out, tumbling under the pavement. Lockhart, startled, reacted instinctively. His finger tightened on the trigger, and a single shot rang out. The bullet tore through Lauren's chest, piercing both lungs. She hit the ground hard, her body broken but her spirit unbroken. As Lockhart sped away, Lauren managed to wave at passing cars, a final plea for help before her strength failed. She collapsed, her life slipping away as headlights flickered in the distance. Motorists stopped, their voices frantic as they called 911 and 11, but it was too late. Lauren Burke was gone, her dreams extinguished on a lonely stretch of highway. Lockhart, meanwhile, was already covering his tracks. He drove to a gas station using Lauren's bank card to buy a can of gasoline. His plan was simple: destroy the evidence. He returned to the campus where Lauren's car sat abandoned and doused it with fuel. But in his haste, he grew dizzy from the fumes, rolling down the windows as he drove back to his Chrysler. The fire he set was sloppy, the car only partially burned, a mistake that would haunt him. 3 days later, on March 7, Lockhart's spree came to an end. He attacked a 72-year-old woman in another parking lot, but this time, he couldn't escape. A police chase ended with his arrest. His Chrysler surrounded by flashing lights. At the station, Lockhart broke. His confession spilled out, raw and unfiltered, captured on video. He admitted to kidnapping Lauren, to forcing her to undress, to firing the shot that killed her. It was an accident, he claimed, his voice hollow. But the evidence told a different story. Lauren's iPod, bank cards, and $46.00 were found in his car, tying him to the crime. Ballistic tests confirmed the bullet came from his revolver, discarded during the chase. Experts ruled out an accidental discharge. The trigger had been pulled with intent. Investigators weren't convinced by Lockhart's story. Why force her to undress if not for darker motives? Why shoot her as she fled if not to silence her? The theory emerged that Lauren's escape attempt had forced his hand. She'd seen his face, knew his voice. She was a witness he couldn't afford to let live. The prosecution painted a picture of a man who'd chosen violence over mercy, a predator who'd hunted women for weeks. The trial began on November 8, 2010, 2 years after Lauren's death. Lockhart's defense leaned heavily on his mental state. His attorneys argued he was a troubled veteran, scarred by military service, his actions impulsive rather than calculated. A psychologist testified to his below-average IQ and emotional immaturity, claiming he lacked the clarity to plan a murder. They insisted the shooting was accidental, a reflex in a moment of panic, but the prosecution dismantled these claims. Lockhart's military training meant he knew how to handle a gun. His pattern of targeting women showed premeditation. The kidnapping, the forced undressing, the shot, all pointed to a man in control, not a victim of circumstance. The courtroom was heavy with grief. Lauren's family and friends filled the gallery, their faces etched with loss. They spoke of her warmth, her laughter, her potential. She'd been more than a victim. She'd been a daughter, a sister, a friend whose light had touched everyone. The jury, moved by their words, deliberated carefully. They returned a guilty verdict, convicting Lockhart of kidnapping and murder. During the sentencing phase, his defense painted him as a broken soldier, a man haunted by combat and loss. They presented witnesses who called him a war hero, hoping to sway the jury toward mercy. The jury recommended life without parole, a unanimous decision. But the trial judge, in a rare move, disagreed. In a 28-page sentencing order, he laid out his reasoning. The kidnapping was egregious. Lauren had been alone, unarmed, chosen at random on a campus where she should have felt safe. Lockhart's actions were deliberate, his remorse absent. The judge noted evidence the jury hadn't seen. Lockhart's string of prior assaults, his dishonorable conduct in the military. Had they known, the judge argued, the recommendation might have been different. On that basis, he sentenced Lockhart to death. Courtney Lockhart remains on Alabama's death row, his appeal stretching across years. In 2013, 2014, and 2015, courts upheld his sentence, rejecting claims of mental defect or ineffective counsel. In 2018, human rights lawyers argued his 2010 defense was flawed, but the outcome held firm. Lauren's parents, Jim and Vivian Burke, have vowed to fight any attempt to overturn the sentence. He gave our daughter the death penalty, Jim said, his voice steady with resolve. He doesn't deserve a second chance. Vivian echoed, "She had no second chance. Why should he?" As the rain falls outside, Lauren Burke's story lingers like a wound that never heals. She was a young woman on the cusp of everything, her life stolen in a moment of cruelty. Courtney Lockhart, a man undone by his own demons, chose to destroy rather than rebuild. What drove him to that parking lot, to that fatal shot? Was it desperation, anger, or something colder, something that lives in the shadows of the human heart? This is the second shadow we've uncovered tonight. 6 more await, each a reminder of the fragility of life and the weight of choices. Stay with us as the storm carries us deeper into the past. Part 3, The Silent Apartment of Heather Maples. In the small college town of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, the summer of 2015 hummed with the promise of new beginnings. For 22-year-old Heather Maples, life was a canvas of possibility. She'd left her Texas home to chase her dream of becoming a psychologist, her heart full of ambition and her smile bright enough to light up a room. Heather was a hurricane of energy, her laughter contagious, her warmth a gift to everyone she met. But on a quiet August morning, her apartment fell silent, a silence that hid a horror no one could have imagined. This is the story of Heather Maples, a young woman whose life was stolen in a brutal act of violence, and the relentless search for answers that followed. Heather Nicole Maples was born on August 23, 1992, in Ocala, Florida, a hurricane baby, as her mother Jennifer lovingly called her. From a young age, Heather's spirit was unstoppable. She was bold, compassionate, and fiercely devoted to those she loved. When her younger brother Ryan was diagnosed with developmental delays, Heather, barely in middle school, became his protector. She spent hours teaching him to speak, walk, and eat on his own. Her patience, a testament to her heart. By 22, she was ready to carve her own path. A call from a former classmate, Chaz, lured her to Murfreesboro, a cozy town with a college that felt like the perfect place to start her journey. Heather threw herself into her new life. She found a job at a real estate agency in the residential complex where she lived, balancing work with college preparations. Her best friend, Kelsey Price, lived nearby, their bond a lifeline in the whirlwind of change. Heather's days were filled with chatter and laughter, her nights with plans for the future. She had recently been accepted to college, a milestone she shared with her mother in an excited phone call. "I did it, Mom," she said, her voice brimming with pride. But beneath the surface, her personal life was shifting. Her relationship with Chaz, which had turned romantic, began to crumble under his anger and aggression. Heather, ever resilient, ended it, choosing herself over a toxic bond. August 7th, 2015, started like any other day. Heather was expected at work, her desk at the agency, waiting. But when the morning stretched on and she didn't appear, Kelsey wasn't immediately alarmed. Heather was notorious for oversleeping, her late nights at local bars often leaving her groggy. The previous evening, she'd gone out with friends, texting Kelsey to come get her if she didn't answer her phone. Kelsey tried calling. Her messages met with silence. Assuming Heather was just sleeping off a wild night, Kelsey drove to her apartment, a short walk from her own. The front door was unlocked, a detail that struck her as odd, but not yet ominous. Inside, the apartment was still, the air heavy with an unspoken wrongness. Kelsey stepped into Heather's bedroom, expecting to find her friend sprawled across the bed, lost in sleep. Instead, she saw Heather lying face down, her body unnaturally still. She was wearing only a crop top, her lower half bare, a sight that sent a shiver through Kelsey. "Heather, wake up," she called, her voice trembling. She reached out, tapping Heather's foot, and froze. The skin was cold, lifeless. Horror crashed over her like a wave. Kelsey stumbled outside, her hand shaking as she dialed 911, her voice breaking as she whispered, "She's gone." Emergency services arrived quickly, their sirens cutting through the morning calm. Detective Tommy Massey was among the first on the scene, his years of experience doing little to dull the impact of what he saw. Heather's face bore the marks of violence, bruises, cuts, her hair matted with blood. The walls were splattered with crimson, a silent scream of the brutality she'd endured. The forensic team moved methodically, their gloved hands collecting evidence from a scene that spoke of rage and chaos. Heather had been beaten, tortured, and assaulted, her life extinguished in a frenzy of cruelty. Investigation began with the chilling realization there were no signs of forced entry. The unlocked door suggested Heather knew her attacker, perhaps even let them in. Detective Massey and his partner, Detective Maples, coincidentally sharing Heather's surname, knew this case would be a nightmare. Heather had no enemies, no obvious reason to be targeted. Her life was one of connection, not conflict. Yet someone had entered her world and destroyed it. The detectives turned to her inner circle, their questions probing the relationships that defined her final days. Kelsey was a key witness, her grief raw as she shared what she knew. She told Massey about Heather's breakup with Chaz, whose anger had left her shaken. "He could be cruel," Kelsey said, her voice tight. She ended it because she deserved better. Chaz became an early suspect, his history of aggression a red flag, but another name emerged, a young man named Michael, who tried to access the crime scene despite police tape. Michael claimed he'd had dinner with Heather the night before, then driven her home after she'd had trouble at a bar. A man named Ottavio had been aggressive, he said, bothering Heather until Michael intervened. He'd unlocked her door for her, explaining why it was open. She'd been wearing a dress with no pockets and forgot to take her keys. Michael's story was convincing, his disappointment genuine. Surveillance footage from the bar confirmed his account. His fingerprints and DNA didn't match the crime scene. He was cleared, but Ottavio, a friend of Heather's, became the next focus. Kelsey helped unlock Heather's phone, revealing a late-night message inviting Ottavio to her apartment hours before her death. Why would she reach out to him after his behavior at the bar? The answer was simple. They were friends, and his aggression had been an outlier, catching her off guard. Detectives interrogated Ottavio, his shock at Heather's death palpable. He agreed to a DNA test, confident it would clear him. It did. The investigation stalled, the detectives working around the clock, combing through surveillance footage and witness statements. The crime scene yielded crucial evidence: unknown DNA, a hair not belonging to Heather, and most significantly, a bloody fingerprint on the right side of her bed. Detective Massey described it as pristine, as if someone had deliberately pressed their finger into the blood. The print was sent for analysis along with the other evidence, but answers were slow to come. Heather's phone, now unlocked, offered no clear leads. The detectives felt the weight of the case, knowing a killer was still out there, hidden in plain sight. On the 9th day, as Massey prepared to leave the office late at night, a call changed everything. The forensic lab had a match for the bloody fingerprint. It belonged to Brandon Bowling, a young man whose prints were on file from a previous job. Bowling wasn't a known associate of Heather's. His name a surprise to everyone. Massey approached the interrogation carefully, hoping to give Bowling a chance to explain. "Tell me about that night," he said, his voice calm but probing. Bowling's story was vague, his denials unconvincing. He claimed he hadn't seen Heather, hadn't been to her apartment. But the fingerprint was fresh, undeniable. Sensing Bowling's unease, Massey pressed harder. "If you're innocent, a DNA test will prove it," he said. Bowling agreed, perhaps hoping to bluff his way out, but the detectives weren't waiting. They requested a warrant to access his phone, suspecting it held the key to his movements. What they found was beyond comprehension. A video on Bowling's phone captured the crime in horrifying detail. It showed Heather, still alive, enduring intimate acts and brutal beatings. The room was unmistakably hers, the timestamp aligning with her final hours. The video was a confession in itself, a window into a mind capable of unspeakable cruelty. Brandon Bowling's motives remained a mystery. He wasn't a jilted lover, a rival, or a friend betrayed. He was a stranger, his connection to Heather unclear. Detectives theorized a chance encounter, perhaps at the bar or through a mutual acquaintance. The brutality suggested rage, a need to dominate, or a psychological break fueled by unknown triggers. The video hinted at a sadistic impulse, a desire to record his power over her, but Bowling offered no explanation, his silence a final act of defiance. In February 2018, Brandon Richmond Bowling pleaded guilty to the murder of Heather Maples. The courtroom was a sea of emotion, Heather's family and friends grappling with their loss. Her mother, Jennifer, delivered a speech that stunned the room. She spoke of Heather's vibrancy, her love for her brother, her dreams of helping others, but she also extended a gesture of humanity. Approaching Bowling's mother in the corridor after the verdict, "We both lost our children today," she said, embracing her. Their shared grief a bridge across the divide. Bowling was sentenced to 40 years without parole. A life behind bars for a life taken. As the rain falls outside, Heather Maple's story clings to the air like a ghost. She was a young woman with everything ahead of her, her light extinguished by a darkness no one saw coming. Brandon Bowling, a man whose motives remained locked in his mind, chose to destroy rather than create. What drove him to her apartment, to that act of violence? Was it a fleeting rage, a hidden obsession, or something deeper, something that festers in the shadows of the soul? This is the third shadow we've uncovered tonight. 5 more remain, each a testament to the fragility of trust and the cost of cruelty. Stay with us as the storm carries us deeper into the past. Part 4, the vanishing of Kristen Smart. In the spring of 1996, the campus of California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo buzzed with the energy of youth. It was a place where dreams took root, where students like 19-year-old Kristen Smart chased futures as boundless as the California sky. Kristen was a dreamer, a vibrant, adventurous soul with a love for the ocean and a heart full of wanderlust. But on a warm Memorial Day weekend, as the campus quieted for the holiday, Kristen vanished, her laughter silenced in a single night. For decades, her disappearance haunted those who knew her, a mystery shrouded in whispers and suspicion. This is the story of Kristen Smart, a young woman whose final walk led to a truth buried in shadows and the relentless quest to uncover it. Kristen Denise Smart was born on February 20, 1977 in Augsburg, Bavaria, to American parents teaching children of military personnel. Her early years were spent abroad, but her family settled in Stockton, California, where Kristen grew into a spirited young woman. The eldest of three, she was a whirlwind of creativity and courage, her mother Denise calling her a dreamer who wanted to see the world. After graduating high school in 1995, Kristen worked as a lifeguard and camp counselor in Hawaii, her love for adventure shining through. By 1996, she was a freshman at Cal Poly, studying architecture before switching to communication studies, her sights set on becoming a global reporter, like Joan London. Kristen's life was one of promise, her Sundays marked by routine calls home to her family, but on May 25, 1996, everything changed. It was a Friday night, the start of Memorial Day weekend, and Kristen attended an off-campus birthday party. The details of that night are murky, clouded by conflicting accounts. Some said she was heavily intoxicated. Others claimed she barely drank. There were whispers of a date-rape drug, a chilling possibility that hung over the investigation. By 2 a.m., Kristen was seen passed out on a neighbor's lawn, vulnerable under the starlit sky. Two fellow students, Tim Davis and Cheryl Anderson, spotted her and offered to help her back to her dorm, Muir Hall. Then a third figure emerged from the shadows, Paul Flores, a fellow freshman living in Santa Lucia Hall. Paul, who was also leaving the party, offered to walk Kristen the rest of the way, noting his dorm was close to hers. Tim, who lived off campus, left the group, and Cheryl, uneasy but trusting, continued with them. Along the way, she noticed Paul's behavior, his arm around Kristen's waist, her arms draped around his neck, their stops frequent and unexplained. Paul suggested Cheryl go ahead, assuring her he'd get Kristen home safely. Reluctantly, she did, glancing back to confirm he was still with her. At an intersection near their dorms, Paul claimed he and Kristen parted ways. It was around 2:30 a.m. Kristen Smart was never seen again. When Sunday came and Kristen's weekly call never arrived, her family felt the first stirrings of worry. Her roommate, Crystal Calvin, found it odd, noting none of Kristen's belongings were missing, no clothes, no wallet, no sign she'd planned to leave. By May 27, her roommate and a neighbor alerted the university police, but no report was filed until days later, a delay that would haunt the case. Kristen's parents, Stan and Denise, were contacted by the San Luis Obispo Police Department, their hearts sinking as they realized something was terribly wrong. Paul Flores became the immediate person of interest. He was the last to see Kristen, his story vague and shifting. When questioned 5 days later, investigators noticed a black eye on his face. "I got it playing basketball," he said, but a friend later contradicted him, claiming the bruise predated the game. Paul then changed his story, saying he'd hit his eye on a steering wheel while installing a car radio at 2 a.m. Man, unlikely tale that raised red flags. His dorm room number 198 in Santa Lucia Hall became a focal point. On June 29, 4 cadaver dogs trained to detect human remains were brought in. Each one alerted to the same spot, a corner of Paul's mattress. The dogs' reactions were unmistakable, their handlers noting a strong scent of death. Yet, no physical evidence, no blood, no DNA was found to confirm their suspicions. Paul Flores remained free, his silence protected by the Fifth Amendment. He refused to cooperate, invoking his right against self-incrimination during a 1997 deposition. The Smart family, desperate for answers, filed a wrongful death suit, but the court declined to proceed, citing the ongoing criminal investigation. Searches of properties owned by Paul's family yielded nothing, and the case grew cold, a billboard with Kristen's face, a constant reminder of her absence. For years, the investigation languished, the San Luis Obispo Sheriff's Department frustrated by a lack of leads. But the story didn't end there. In 2018, a young man named Chris Lambert, haunted by Kristen's billboard since childhood, quit his job to create a podcast called Your Own Backyard. With no formal training, only a passion for justice, Chris dove into the case, interviewing witnesses, uncovering overlooked details, and giving voice to the silenced. His work was a game changer, shaking loose secrets that had been buried for decades. On February 20, 2019, Kristen's birthday, Chris met Denise Smart at a memorial, forging a bond that would fuel his mission. The podcast exploded, amassing over 11 million downloads and drawing national attention. Kristen's interviews revealed disturbing allegations. A former colleague of Paul's mother, Susan Flores, claimed Susan hadn't slept well after her husband Ruben received a late-night call during Memorial Day weekend, leaving abruptly. A tenant reported a daily 420 AM alarm from the Flores backyard after Kristen's disappearance. An Australian exchange student alleged seeing Kristen fighting off Paul that night, a claim that suggested a struggle. Women who knew Paul came forward with stories of his predatory behavior, excessive drinking, harassment, even assaults. An ex-girlfriend recounted him brandishing a knife during a fight, while others described waking up disoriented after drinks with him, their memories fragmented. The podcast's impact was seismic. It prompted new witnesses to speak, their stories painting a portrait of Paul Flores as a man capable of violence. In 2020, the investigation reignited. On January 29, 2 trucks owned by Paul were seized. By February 5, search warrants targeted 4 Flores family properties, including Paul's home in San Pedro, California. Items recovered included date rape, drugs, and videos of Paul assaulting young women, chilling evidence of his character. On April 13, 2021, Paul and his father Ruben were arrested. Paul was charged with murder, Ruben as an accessory after the fact. A March 2021 search of Ruben's home using cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar uncovered anomalies in the backyard suggesting a burial site. The trial began on July 18, 2022 in Monterey County, with Paul and Ruben tried separately but simultaneously. Deputy District Attorney Chris Puvrell painted a grim picture. A young woman lost to the evil that is Paul Flores, her body hidden by a father complicit in the cover-up. Evidence pointed to a murder during a sexual assault. The statute of limitations expired for rape, but not for felony murder. Witnesses, including women referred to as Rhonda Doe and Sarah Doe, testified to Paul's predatory acts, their accounts bringing jurors to tears. A key witness, Jennifer Hudson, recalled Paul joking about burying Kristen under a skate ramp, a chilling detail from years past. The defense, led by Robert Sanger, questioned the evidence's reliability. No body, no DNA, no definitive proof of what happened after Paul left Kristen at her dorm, they argued. They challenged Hudson's credibility, citing her drug use and delayed reporting. But the prosecution's case was bolstered by the cadaver dogs, the black eye, and the pattern of Paul's behavior. Testimony about Ruben's backyard, where soil disturbances suggested a shallow grave, added weight to the accessory charge. The trial, expected to conclude in September 2022, was an emotional crucible. Jurors breaking down under the weight of graphic details. For the Smart family, the trial was a decades-long exhale, a chance to finally face the man they believed took their daughter. Denise Smart credited Chris Lambert and Sheriff Ian Parkinson for reviving the case, their efforts a beacon in the darkness. Kristen's story, once a face on a billboard, became a national call for justice, her memory honored by those who refused to let her fade. As the rain falls outside, Kristen Smart's absence lingers like a wound unhealed. She was a young woman with the world at her feet, her life stolen in a moment of betrayal. Paul Flores, a man whose silence speaks louder than words, stands at the heart of her mystery. What happened in those final moments? Did she fight, as the student claimed? Her courage, her last act? Or was she lost to a predator's plan, her fate sealed under a moonlit sky? The truth, like Kristen herself, remains just out of reach, a shadow in the storm. Okay. This is the 4th shadow we've uncovered tonight. 4 more await, each a reminder of the cost of silence and the power of persistence. Stay with us as the storm carries us deeper into the past. Part 5, The Deadly Charade of Sheila LaBar. In the quiet countryside of Fort Payne, Alabama, the summer of 1958 welcomed a girl named Sheila LaBar, born on the 4th of July under a sky of fireworks. To the world, she was an angel-faced child with big blue eyes and a voice that could charm anyone. But beneath her radiant exterior lay a childhood scarred by unimaginable cruelty, a darkness that would twist her into a predator. By the time she reached adulthood, Sheila had learned to wield her beauty like a weapon, luring men into her web with promises of love, only to deliver pain and death. This is the story of Sheila Labar, a woman whose angelic facade hid a monster, and the trail of broken lives she left on a New Hampshire ranch. Sheila's early years were anything but idyllic. The youngest of 3 children, she grew up on a secluded farm surrounded by cornfields that seemed to stretch into forever. Her father, Manuel Bailey, was a tyrant, his alcoholism fueling a reign of terror over his family. When sober, he was distant. When drunk, he was a beast. He hurled insults, beat his wife and children with whatever was at hand, and sometimes locked them out in the cold, forcing Sheila, her mother, and siblings to huddle in the barn or fields. One night, in a drunken rage, he threw a flower pot that struck young Sheila's head, leaving her with a concussion and a scar she'd hide for life. Worse still were the whispers of deeper horrors, allegations that Manuel forced himself on his daughters. A trauma Sheila and her sister Lynn carried in silence. Despite the nightmare at home, Sheila thrived at school. She was bright, ambitious, and dreamed of escaping the farm to become an actress or singer. Her voice was captivating, her presence magnetic. She clung to those dreams, a lifeline through the chaos. At 18, she fled her father's house, determined to conquer the world. But the world wasn't kind to a young woman with no money and only a high school diploma. She took a job as a maid in a hotel where her sister worked. Her beauty drawing attention, she quickly learned to manipulate. Men fell for her charm, and Sheila mastered the art of bending them to her will. Her first marriage to Jonathan Baxter in the late 1970s was a fleeting disaster. Jonathan, a young father, discovered Sheila abusing his daughter from a previous relationship. Without hesitation, he filed for divorce, casting her out. Sheila drifted, living off a string of short-lived romances, her relationships burning out as quickly as they ignited. In the early 1980s, she met Ronnie Jennings, a volatile man whose temper matched her own. Their marriage was a storm of infidelity, fights, and violence. In 1984, after a heated argument, Sheila demanded a divorce. Ronnie refused, not out of love, but to spite her. Enraged, Sheila spiraled, swallowing a cocktail of drugs and alcohol before crashing her car into a tree at high speed. The accident left her in a coma for over a week, her survival a miracle. She awoke with a severe head injury and was transferred to a psychiatric hospital where she spent months recovering. There, she claimed an orderly harassed her, exploiting her sedated state, a trauma that deepened her mistrust. When she returned to Ronnie, her behavior grew menacing. During one fight, she attacked him with nail scissors, her eyes wild with fury. Fearing for his life, Ronnie fled and filed for divorce, leaving Sheila alone once more. Now, in her mid-20s, Sheila turned to the dating columns of newspapers, her alluring ads drawing men like moths to a flame. She dominated her partners, her need for control suffocating. In the mid-1980s, her photo caught the eye of Wilfred Bill Labar, a wealthy 60-year-old chiropractor and widower. Bill owned a sprawling ranch in Epping, New Hampshire, where he raised horses. Lonely and charmed by Sheila's letters, some laced with nude photos, he invited her to visit. Their romance was swift, Sheila's youth and beauty flattering the aging doctor. By 1987, she'd moved into his ranch, taken his surname without a formal marriage. A bold move Bill didn't contest. Sheila seized control of Bill's life, managing his finances, business, and property with an iron grip. As Bill aged, unable to meet her physical needs, Sheila claimed he permitted her to take lovers, some of whom she brought to the ranch. One was Wayne Innes, a young Jamaican hired as a ranch hand. By the mid-1990s, Sheila and Wayne married, though their relationship was fraught with her dominance. Whispers swirled that Sheila pressured Wayne to kill Bill for his wealth, a plan he resisted, but her sights soon turned to a new target, a man whose vulnerability would prove fatal. In the early 2000s, Sheila took a job as an operator for intimate phone services, her enchanting voice drawing clients eager to meet her. Among them was Kenny County, a 24-year-old with a kind heart and a low IQ that made him trusting to a fault. Kenny lived with his mother, their bond unbreakable, until Sheila entered his life. She seduced him with promises of love, luring him to her ranch with a night of passion. But once he moved in, the fairy tale turned into a nightmare. Sheila transformed a room into a torture chamber, her affection replaced by brutality. Kenny's body became a canvas of bruises, cuts, burns, and scratches, his spirit broken under her control. Sheila isolated him, barring contact with his family. Neighbors noticed his gaunt frame, his eyes hollow with fear. A local store clerk, alarmed by his appearance, snapped a photo as he bought 2 canisters of fuel, his face marked by a broken nose and fresh bruises. The image, later used in court, was a chilling glimpse of his suffering. Days later, Kenny vanished. His worried mother visited the ranch only to be met by Sheila's hostility. "Leave him alone," she snapped, her eyes cold. When Kenny stopped calling, his family filed a missing persons report, suspecting he was being held against his will. In 2006, police arrived at Sheila's ranch, their suspicions long simmering. Sheila claimed Kenny had fled, fearing his mother's visits. She played an audio recording, allegedly of Kenny saying his mother had attacked him, a claim that rang false. The next day, an officer secured a search warrant, and what they found turned the case into a horror story. Near the outbuildings, multiple fires burned, fueled by mattresses, furniture, and hay doused with flammable liquid. Among the ashes were bones. Human bones, later identified as Kenny's. Inside the house, blood stained nearly every surface, poorly scrubbed, as if a massacre had unfolded. Forensic tests revealed the blood came from at least 3 people, hinting at more victims. The investigation widened, Sheila's name linked to other missing men from her past. Her history of manipulation, violence, and control painted a picture of a predator who thrived on power. The bones in the fire confirmed Kenny's fate. His body burned to erase her crime, but the sheer volume of blood suggested Sheila's ranch was a killing ground, its secrets buried in the soil and ash. She was arrested, her angelic facade crumbling under the weight of evidence. The trial in 2008 was a reckoning. Prosecutors portrayed Sheila as a calculated killer, her charm a lure for vulnerable men like Kenny. The defense argued she was a victim of her traumatic childhood, her sanity fractured by abuse and injury. They pointed to her father's cruelty, the head injuries from the flower pot and car crash, and the alleged hospital assault. But the evidence was damning: the torture room, the bones, and witness accounts of her sadistic control. The jury saw through her tears, convicting her of 2 murders, Kenny's and another suspected victim, though criminologists believed her toll was higher. On July 2008, Sheila Barr was sentenced to life without parole, her appeals rejected. She remains at Homestead Correctional Facility in Florida, her name synonymous with deception and death. The ranch, once a symbol of Bill's wealth, became a graveyard, its fires a futile attempt to burn away her sins. Kenny's family mourned, a gentle soul lost to a monster, their grief a reminder of the cost of trust misplaced. As the rain falls outside, Sheila Barr's story lingers like a poison in the air. She was a woman who could have been a star, her voice and beauty a gift. But the darkness of her past, or perhaps something innate, turned her into a predator. What drove her to torture and kill? Was it the scars of her childhood, a need to reclaim power, or a hunger for destruction that lived in her soul? The answer, like the men she destroyed, is lost in the shadows of her ranch. This is the 5th shadow we've uncovered tonight. 3 more remain, each a testament to the fragility of trust and the depths of human cruelty. Stay with us as the storm carries us deeper into the past. Part 6, The Lethal Lies of Sherry Miller. In the small town of Otisville, Michigan, the late 1990s carried the quiet hum of ordinary lives. Bruce Miller ran a junkyard, a man whose steady hands and generous heart made him a pillar of the community. His wife, Sherry Miller, seemed the perfect partner, devoted, charming, a mother to 2 children from a previous marriage. But beneath her warm smile lay a web of deception so intricate, so cruel, it would unravel a family and leave a good man dead. This is the story of Sherry Miller, a woman whose lies spun a deadly trap and the lover she manipulated into pulling the trigger. Sherry Miller's life was a carefully crafted illusion. Born in the 1960s, she grew up in Michigan, her early years unremarkable but marked by a knack for bending the truth. By her 30s, she was a master of manipulation, her words weaving stories that captivated those around her. She married Bruce Miller, a hardworking man who saw in her a partner for life. Bruce loved Sherry's children as his own, his dreams of adopting them a testament to his kindness. To the outside world, their marriage was solid, their home a haven of stability, but Sherry harbored secrets, her heart restless and her loyalty fleeting. In 1998, Sherry began an online affair with Jerry Cassidy, a man from a distant state whose own life was fraying at the edges. Jerry, battling depression and a crumbling marriage, found solace in Sherry's messages. She painted herself as a victim, trapped in a marriage with a controlling, abusive husband. Bruce, she claimed, was tied to the mob, his junkyard a front for illegal dealings. She sent Jerry photos of bruises, carefully applied makeup, though he didn't know it, describing beatings that never happened. Her stories grew darker, each email a thread in the tapestry of her deception. Jerry, vulnerable and desperate for connection, believed every word. Sherry's lies fed his need to protect, to be her savior. By early 1999, she escalated the charade, claiming she was pregnant with Jerry's child. She sent doctored ultrasound images, her belly staged to mimic a growing life. Jerry, overwhelmed with hope, clung to the idea of a future with Sherry and their baby. But in November 1999, Sherry delivered a devastating blow. An email, supposedly from Bruce, arrived in Jerry's inbox. "I know about the bastard," it read. "It won't be born." Hours later, Sherry texted Jerry claiming Bruce had forced her to abort their child. Attached were photos of her battered body. More makeup, more lies. Jerry's world collapsed. He believed Bruce had killed his unborn child, not once but twice. As Sherry later claimed, a second pregnancy, twins, met the same fate. His grief turned to rage, his love for Sherry a fire that consumed reason. "I can't go on like this," he told her. On November 8, 1999, "I'll kill him." Sherry didn't hesitate. She saw her chance to eliminate Bruce, not for money, but to protect the fragile house of cards she'd built. Yet they devised a plan, plotting routes, parking spots, and the perfect moment to strike. That evening, Jerry drove hundreds of miles from his home to Michigan, his mind fixed on vengeance. Bruce, unaware of the storm gathering, was at his junkyard, closing up for the night. Sherry called him, her voice casual as she asked him to pick up a pizza on his way home. The call was a distraction, keeping Bruce on the phone as Jerry approached from behind. In the dim light of the junkyard, Jerry raised a 20-gauge shotgun and fired. The blast tore through Bruce's chest, killing him instantly. He fell to the ground, blood pooling beneath him, his life extinguished in a moment of cold calculation. Jerry fled, his hands trembling but his mission complete. Sherry, meanwhile, played her part flawlessly. She called Bruce's brother, Chuck, her voice laced with worry. "He's been gone too long," she said. "Can you check the junkyard?" Chuck arrived to a scene of horror, his brother's body lifeless on the cold floor. Sherry, informed of the discovery, let out screams that echoed through the night. Her grief, a performance honed to perfection. To the police, it looked like a robbery gone wrong. Bruce often carried cash and his wallet was missing, a detail Jerry had ensured to muddy the waters. The investigation began with few leads. Detectives considered a theory of murder tied to falsified vehicle identification numbers, common in the junkyard trade, but it led nowhere. A friend of Bruce's, John Hutchinson, came under scrutiny after admitting to borrowing $2,000 0 cents from him. Police searched his home, confiscated weapons, and subjected him to a polygraph, which he failed, but the evidence was inconclusive, and Hutchinson was released. The case grew cold, the killer's trail fading into the Michigan winter. Sherry, meanwhile, moved on with chilling speed. 2 days after Bruce's death, she was seen dancing at a bar in Otisville, her laughter jarring to those who knew her loss. Within weeks, she had a new boyfriend, Jeff Foster, a local delivery boy who moved into the home she'd shared with Bruce. Jerry, expecting to be with the woman he'd killed for, was stunned. Sherry distanced herself, her messages growing cold. By December 1999, she'd cut him off entirely, leaving him to grapple with the realization he'd murdered an innocent man for a woman who'd never loved him. For years, the truth remained buried. Sherry lived her life, her lies untouched by suspicion. But in 2012, a public interview on a popular TV station shattered her facade. Sherry, now incarcerated, confessed to orchestrating Bruce's murder. She admitted Bruce was no mobster, no abuser, just a good man who loved her and her children. The bruises, the pregnancies, the ultrasounds, all were fabrications, crafted to manipulate Jerry's fragile mind. "I was afraid he'd find out who I really was," she said, her voice hollow. "It was easier to have him killed than face the truth." Jerry's confession revealed the depth of her cunning. She'd known Jerry's depression made him malleable, his devotion a tool she could wield. She'd turned down a plea deal for 15 years, so confident in her ability to charm a jury that she bet on her lies. But the evidence, her emails, Jerry's testimony, the timeline, closed around her like a noose. Both she and Jerry were convicted, sentenced to life without parole. Sherry remains at the Valley Women's Complex in Michigan, her story a cautionary tale of deception's deadly cost. The investigation into Bruce's murder had been a slow burn, its resolution a testament to persistence. Detectives, initially stumped, pieced together the digital trail of Sherry's manipulation, her emails a roadmap to her guilt. Jerry's confession, racked with regret, corroborated the timeline. His shotgun, the key to the crime scene. The junkyard, once a place of honest labor, became a symbol of betrayal, its shadows holding the truth for over a decade. Morse's family, particularly his sister Judy, mourned a man whose only crime was loving too deeply. Judy noted Sherry's callous behavior after the murder, her dancing and quick romance a slap to their grief. Bruce had wanted a family, a simple life with Sherry and her children. Instead, he became a victim of her ambition to hide her true self, a self she described as unworthy, a lie she killed to protect. As the rain falls outside, Sherry Miller's story clings to the night like a bitter chill. She was a woman who could have lived quietly, loved honestly, but her need for control, her fear of exposure, turned her into a puppet master, pulling strings until blood was spilled. What drove her to weave such a deadly web? Was it shame, pride, or a darkness that thrived on power? And what of Jerry, a man undone by love, his hands stained for a lie? Their story is a wound, a reminder that the deadliest weapons are often the words we choose to believe. This is the sixth shadow we've uncovered tonight. 2 more remain, each a descent into the heart of human frailty and the price of betrayal. Stay with us as the storm carries us deeper into the past. Part 7, The Bone Crusher of Peoria. The heart of Peoria, Illinois, the early 2000s were a time of quiet routines and close-knit communities, but beneath the surface of this Midwestern city, a predator prowled, his shadow falling over the most vulnerable. Women disappeared from the streets, their bodies left in ditches and fields, their lives erased with brutal efficiency. The killer was Larry Bright, a man whose unassuming exterior hid a bloodlust that would earn him a chilling nickname. The Bone Crusher. This is the story of 8 women whose light was stolen in the desperate hunt to stop a serial killer before he claimed more. Peoria in 2003 was a city of contrasts. Bustling downtowns and struggling neighborhoods where poverty and addiction cast long shadows. Among those caught in the margins were women like Sabrina Payne, Barbara Williams, and Laura Lawler, each fighting their own battles with crack cocaine and survival through prostitution. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, lives defined not by their struggles, but by the love they gave and the dreams they held. Yet to Larry Brett, they were prey, their vulnerability a beacon for his rage. Born on July 8th, 1966 in Peoria, Larry Dean Bright grew up in a working-class family. His early years unremarkable, but at 19, he served 2 years in prison for burglary and carjacking, an experience that hardened him. His family noticed a change. Larry became angrier, more volatile, his temper a spark waiting to ignite. By his 30s, he was battling addictions to prescription opioids and crack cocaine, his life unraveling in a haze of drugs and obsession. He lived with his mother in a modest guest house, its backyard adorned with a flower garden he tended with care. To neighbors, he was a quiet man, his gardening a quaint hobby, but beneath the blooms lay secrets, darker than the soil. Wright's descent into murder began in the summer of 2003. On July 27, he picked up 36-year-old Sabrina Payne on Peoria's south side, a woman known for supporting her drug habit through sex work. He drove her to his guest house where they shared alcohol and cocaine. What started as a transactional encounter turned deadly. Bright later claims Sabrina tried to steal from him, a slight that sparked his rage. Right? He strangled her, his hands tightening until her life slipped away. He dumped her body in a field near Tremont, Illinois, where it was found 2 days later. The autopsy failed to pinpoint a cause of death, leading some detectives to suspect an overdose. But one investigator, uneasy, sensed something more sinister. The killings continued, each following a grim pattern. On February 5th, 2004, 36-year-old Barbara Williams was found face down in a snowy ditch near Edwards, Illinois, her body partially clothed. She'd been seen alive the previous night, her autopsy revealing fatal levels of cocaine and signs of blunt force trauma. Police hesitated to call it murder, the drug connection clouding their judgment. By summer, more women vanished. 32-year-old Shakonda Thomas, last seen in August. Shirley Intrap, reported missing after 3 days. and Tamara Walls, gone for weeks. All were black women, their lives intertwined with Peoria's drug scene, their disappearances barely noted by a city distracted by daily life. September 2004 brought more grim discoveries. Laura Lawler, a 36-year-old mother of 8, vanished after leaving with a man and woman. Her partner, the father of her 7 daughters and son, described her as the love of his life, her struggle with addiction, a battle she fought with grace. On September 25, 29-year-old Linda Neal was found nude on King Road in Tazewell County, her body discarded like refuse. By October 15, 33-year-old Brenda Irving was discovered in a ditch near Farmington, strangled and battered, her autopsy confirming cocaine in her system. Her children had feared for her, knowing she moved in the same circles as the other victims. The pattern was undeniable. Peoria had a serial killer targeting black women in the sex trade. A task force was formed, though one detective later admitted it would have mobilized faster had the victims been white. The police scoured the streets, their leads numbering in the thousands, but the killer remained a ghost. The women's families pleaded for justice, their voices a reminder that these were not just cases, they were lives, each one precious. They were more than their struggles, Laura's partner said. They were loved. The breakthrough came in December 2004 from an unexpected source. Vicky Bomer, a 35-year-old sex worker, was arrested for theft. From her jail cell, she offered a name, Larry Bright. She recounted a terrifying encounter in July. Bright had lured her to his mother's guest house where they shared drugs and alcohol. As her senses dulled, he attacked, attempting to rape her and brandishing a knife. Vicky escaped, her survival a miracle. She hadn't reported it earlier, fearing arrest for outstanding warrants, a fear her criminal record confirmed. Skeptical but intrigued, detectives turned their focus to Bright. On January 20, 2005, police searched Bright's home. The flower garden, so lovingly tended, hid a gruesome secret. Digging beneath the blooms, investigators found bone fragments and ashes, later identified as human remains. Confronted with the destruction of his garden, Bright broke. His confession was chilling, delivered with a detachment that froze the room. He admitted to killing 8 women, detailing each murder with eerie precision. Sabrina Payne, Barbara Williams, Laura Lawler, Shekinah Thomas, Shirley and Trav, Tamara Walls, Linda Neal, and Brenda Irving all had fallen to his hands. Bright described his method to pick up women on Peoria's south side, offering drugs and money. At his guest house, they'd use cocaine and alcohol, the atmosphere deceptively relaxed, but a perceived slight, stealing, disrespect, or simply his own twisted impulse would trigger his rage. He'd strangle or beat them, their struggles no match for his strength. To erase evidence, he'd burn their bodies in a backyard pit, grinding the remains to ash and burying them in his garden. He called it destroying the evidence, a calculated act to evade capture. For Linda Neal and Brenda Irving, wet weather foiled his attempts, forcing him to dump their bodies by the roadside. Bright's confession earned him the moniker the Bone Crusher, a name that captured the horror of his disposal method. He claimed his first 2 murders were spontaneous, driven by anger, but by the third, he admitted to hunting, a word that sent chills through the investigators. His choice of black women wasn't racially motivated, detectives concluded, but tied to his obsession with them, fueled by pornography and proximity to Peoria's south side. I knew them, he said of his victims, as if familiarity justified his cruelty. The evidence was overwhelming. Bone fragments matched the missing women, their DNA a silent accusation. Bright led police to additional remains, his cooperation a bid to avoid the death penalty. In May 2006, he pleaded guilty to 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of drug-induced homicide, sparing his mother the ordeal of a trial. The courtroom was heavy with grief. The victims' families facing the man who'd stolen their loved one. They spoke of their pain, their voices a chorus of loss. These were not just prostitutes or addicts, one said. They were our family. Bright was sentenced to 7 life terms without parole, plus 30 years for the drug-induced homicide to be served concurrently. The plea deal ensured he'd die in prison, a condition he accepted without protest. Today he resides at the Shawnee Correctional Center in Vienna, Illinois, his garden of horrors a distant memory. For the families, justice brought little solace. Their daughters, mothers, and sisters were gone, their stories reduced to case files, but never forgotten. The investigation had been a race against time, the task force's persistence a testament to the value of every life. Detectives reflected on the systemic failures that delayed action, the stigma of addiction and sex work blinding the city to the crisis. Vicky Boehmer's courage, though born of desperation, was the key that unlocked the case. Her survival a beacon in the darkness. The Peoria killings exposed the fragility of the marginalized, a reminder that monsters often hide in plain sight, their gardens blooming with lies. As the rain falls outside, the story of Larry Bright lingers like a scar on the heart of Peoria. 8 women, each with dreams and loves of their own, were silenced by a man whose rage knew no bounds. What drove him to hunt, to destroy? Was it the prison years that broke him, the drugs that fueled him, or a darkness that lived in his soul from the start? The answers are buried with the ashes, a secret only the bones could tell. This is the 7th shadow we've uncovered tonight. One final tale remains, a descent into greed and betrayal that will leave you questioning the masks we wear. Stay with us as the storm carries us deeper into the past. Part 8, The Dentist of Death. In the bustling city of St. Louis, Missouri, the mid-20th century was a time of ambition and opportunity. Amid the hum of progress, Dr. Glennon Engelman seemed an embodiment of the American dream. A respected dentist with a thriving practice, a charming smile, and a reputation for precision. But behind his polished veneer lurked a predator, a man whose greed and cunning turned his dental chair into a throne of murder. From the 1950s to the 1980s, Engelman orchestrated a series of killings so calculated, so cold, they left a trail of shattered families and buried secrets. This is the story of the Dentist of Death, a man who killed for profit and pleasure, and the relentless pursuit to bring him down. Glennon Edward Engelman was born on February 6, 1927, in St. Louis, the son of an electrician who instilled in him a drive for success. Young Glennon was bright, methodical, and ambitious, his sights set on a life beyond his working-class roots. He excelled in school, earning a degree from the Washington University School of Dental Medicine in 1954. By his late 20s, he was a licensed dentist, his practice a beacon of respectability. To patients, he was Dr. Engelman, gentle, professional, a man who fixed smiles with care. But beneath his crisp white coat, a darker impulse stirred, one that saw human lives as pawns in a game of profit. Engelman's descent into crime began with greed, not blood. In the late 1950s, he devised a scheme to defraud insurance companies, exploiting the fine print of life insurance policies. His method was simple yet sinister. Identify a target, insure their life, stage their death, and collect the payout. He needed accomplices, people he could manipulate or control, and he found them in the women who crossed his path. His charm was his weapon, his promises of wealth a lure that blinded them to his true intent. Over 3 decades, Engelman's schemes grew bolder, his body count climbing as he perfected the art of murder. The first to fall was 22-year-old James Stanley Bullock, a mechanic and Engelman's brother-in-law through his marriage to Ruth Jolly. In 1958, Bullock was engaged to marry his future bride. Engelman, sensing opportunity, took out a life insurance policy on him through Ruth. On September 5, Bullock was found dead in his car near Vandeventer Avenue, a single bullet through his heart. The scene suggested a robbery, his wallet missing, but police suspected foul play. The insurance company paid out, and Engelman pocketed the money, his role undetected. Ruth, unaware of her husband's involvement, mourned her brother, never suspecting the man she loved had pulled the trigger. Engelman's marriage to Ruth unraveled soon after, her suspicions growing as his secrecy deepened. By 1962, he was married to his dental assistant, Carmen, a woman he manipulated into his schemes. That year, he set his sights on 23-year-old Eric Douglas Fry, a Dragonline operator at Pacific Quarry. Engelman befriended Fry, offering free dental work to gain his trust. He convinced Fry's fiancée, Carol Wheeling, to take out a $25,000 0-cents life insurance policy on him, naming her as beneficiary. On December 21, 1963, Fry was killed in a staged explosion at the quarry, his body torn apart by dynamite Engelman had rigged. The payout was split with Carol, who believed Engelman's promise of his shared future. Instead, he vanished with his share, leaving her to face suspicion alone. The pattern continued, each killing more audacious. In 1976, Engelman targeted Peter J. Holm, a 27-year-old manager of a car wash chain owned by his family. Holm was married to Engelman's former lover, Sophie Marie Barrera, a woman Engelman still controlled. He convinced Sophie to insure Holm's life for $75,000, 0 cents. promising her a cut of the profits. On December 13th, 1976, Holm was lured to a Pacific, Missouri property under the pretense of a business deal. There, Engelman shot him with a rifle and dumped his body in a car, which he pushed into Merrimack Creek. The car was found the next day. The death ruled as suicide despite the bullet wound, a ruling that baffled Holmes' family but allowed Engelman to collect the payout. Engelman's greed grew insatiable, his targets expanding to entire families. In 1977, he set his sights on the Goosewall family, who owned a successful farm in St. Clair County, Illinois. Arthur Goosewall, 51, and his wife, Vernita, 47, were prosperous but trusting. Their son, Ronald, 25, and his wife, Elizabeth, 24, living nearby. Engelman, through a female accomplice, Barbara, infiltrated their lives, convincing Ronald to take out a $50,000 0-cents life insurance policy. On February 14, 1977, Ronald and Elizabeth were found shot to death in their home, their infant son unharmed in his crib. Suspicion fell on Arthur, but no charges were filed. 2 years later, on March 3, 1979, Arthur and Vernita were shot in their farmhouse, their bodies discovered by a neighbor. The insurance payouts flowed to Engelman's accomplice, who shared the profits with him. The final known victim was Sophie Barrera herself. By 1980, Sophie, now 41, had grown wary of Engelman's control. She threatened to expose his crimes, a risk he couldn't afford. Engelman lured her to a garage in St. Louis where he detonated a bomb hidden in her car. The explosion on April 3, 1980, killed her instantly, her body mangled beyond recognition. The police, suspecting a targeted hit, began to unravel Engelman's web, their investigation circling closer to the dentist, who seemed too clean to be true. The turning point came from an unlikely source, Ruth Jolly, Engelman's first wife. Divorced in 1961, Ruth had remained entangled with him, her love for him a chain she couldn't break. In 1980, haunted by guilt and fear, she agreed to cooperate with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF agents. Fitted her with a wire, capturing hours of conversations where Engelman boasted about his murders. "You're dealing with a man who's killed before," he told her, his voice devoid of remorse. He detailed the Goosewell killings, the bomb that took Sophie, and even confessed to Bullock's murder 22 years earlier. Ruth's recordings were a goldmine, her courage the key to dismantling his empire. On June 23, 1980, Engelman was arrested. His dental practice shuttered as the truth emerged. The evidence was staggering. Ruth's tapes, financial records of insurance payouts, and witness accounts from accomplices like Barbara and Carol. The trials were a spectacle. St. Louis gripped by the revelation that a trusted dentist was a serial killer. In 1980, Engelman was convicted of Sophie Barrera's murder, receiving a 50-year sentence for mail fraud related to the insurance scheme. In 1985, he faced trial for the Goosewell murders, his defense claiming he was a victim of Ruth's manipulation, but the jury saw through his lies, convicting him of 3 counts of murder and sentencing him to 3 life terms without parole. Prosecutors believed Engelman's toll was higher, estimating at least 12 victims, though only 7 were conclusively tied to him. His motives were clear: greed, power, and the thrill of outsmarting the system. He showed no remorse, his only regret being caught. "I played the game and lost," he told a cellmate, his words chilling in their detachment. Engelman died in prison on March 3, 1999 at 72, his secrets buried with him. The families of his victims, Bulick, Fry, Holm, the Goosewells, and Barrera, carried scars that never healed, their trust in the world shattered by a man who wore kindness as a mask. The investigation was a triumph of persistence, the ATF and St. Louis police piecing together a decades-long puzzle. Ruth's bravery was pivotal, her recordings a voice for the dead. The case exposed the fragility of trust, a reminder that monsters often hide behind credentials and smiles. Engelman's dental office, once a place of healing, became a symbol of betrayal, its empty chair a testament to the lives he stole. As the rain falls outside, Glennon Engelman's story lingers like a poison in the air. He was a man who could have saved lives, his skills a gift to the world. But his hunger for wealth, his love of control, turned him into a killer who saw people as policies to be cashed. What drove him to build such a deadly empire? Was it the thrill of the game, the lure of money, or a darkness that lived in his heart from the start? The answer, like the lives he took, is lost in the shadows of St. Louis, a city forever marked by the dentist of death. This is the final shadow we've uncovered tonight. 8 stories, 8 descents into the heart of human darkness, each a reminder of the fragility of life and the weight of choices. Thank you for walking these paths with us. Until the next storm, let the rain carry you into sleep, and may the shadows of the past stay where they belong.